Hey there. Uranus is just about to enter Gemini, and this is kind of like the last major puzzle piece of what makes 2026 and also 2027 such huge, pivotal, momentous years for all of humanity. It's the last puzzle piece because, firstly, all of the outer planets in the last year or two shifted from the earth and water signs to fire and air, and Uranus is now the last one of them. Right, Pluto has shifted from Capricorn fully into Aquarius, Saturn and Neptune have just shifted from Pisces fully into Aries, and Uranus moving out of Taurus and into the mutable air sign of Gemini. Mutable, of course, also means energy is fast, it's adaptable, it's changeable. Very much different to Taurus. Taurus is the first earth sign, it's fixed earth, and it's the sign and the archetypal energy within our own psyche that is the most resistant to change. Gemini, on the other hand, is very much welcoming change. It knows and learns and loves to learn through the curiosity of exploring new avenues, new viewpoints, new perspectives of reality. Uranus and Gemini, in that way, one very basic description is just very heightened mental and nervous system activity, which is no surprise given our current state of the world, right? AI and our screens and this constant flood of information and data and pieces that might seem worthwhile, but maybe not, right? This is so much Gemini. Gemini is all about gathering data and the curiosity. Oh, I want to hear what this person says. Oh, look at this YouTube video. Oh, have you seen this guy say this, right? We get this through our screens more than ever before in human history, at least the ones that we know about. And so here, Uranus and Gemini will heighten that kind of quality in our own psyche, very much asking us to still embody the deeper lessons that hopefully the Taurus archetype has taught us, which is grounding, stability in our own body, the safety and stability of the health of our own body and our nervous system. Just looking back a bit, before we move back to the outer planet configuration and why this is such a big deal, just Uranus and Taurus the last 7-8 years. It first briefly entered Taurus in 2018, but then by early 2019 was fully in the sign of Taurus. And of course, Taurus is one part of your chart, whether you have any planets in Taurus or in Gemini or not. Uranus energy there will be felt. Uranus and Taurus brought us what? It brought us that at the beginning of this cycle, it was more of a radical thing to live out in nature by yourself, have a tiny house, have a cabin, to get out of the system of the matrix, right? Turning after 7 years fully into what? Treadwives, influencing with a lot of fancy dresses, how they cook meals for their 7 children and still making a lot of money, right? So much that Taurus archetype, children, procreative energy, right? Energy that really gives life. Money, sustenance, food is so much part of this. But we also see here the progression of what at first is a radical thing to more or less get out of what the mainstream consensus reality deems appropriate, turning into the new kind of norm. That is so much the process between Uranus and Saturn, right? When Saturn is more normative consciousness in mainstream society, Uranus is the outlaw, Uranus is the rebel, Uranus is the freak who does things differently. But what at first might seem like such a rebellious thing, at some point, sooner or later, will in some way or another be integrated into mainstream society. Another huge thing that we saw, which also kind of corresponds to Chiron in Aries. Aries rules the head and the face and our self-identity, but Taurus, of course, rules our body. And this huge rise in plastic surgery, especially regarding the face, even in the male sphere, or looks maxing, or whatever you want to call it, these kinds of trends. We also saw Taurus ruling food and all of these new technologies of whatever kind of artificial something, fake meat coming out of the cells, coming out of lab cells, modified food, genetically modified food, more on the rise, but also the pushback against that and the desire to return to something more simple and true and raw that just comes from nature itself. Taurus also rules money, and of course, Uranus and Taurus brought this huge rise of cryptocurrencies and especially this big explosion of Bitcoin. Changing our financial systems, and that's still very much on the card, right? Global currencies that are just run through crypto blockchains, but then still controlled by mainstream banks. This is like on the agenda, very much so. Anyhow, just a few things to maybe ponder upon. But in general, Uranus and Taurus would have correlated to liberating us to where and how we find a sense of safety, stability, but also pleasure in our own embodiment. That is what Uranus and Taurus was so much about and for on a personal level, and how we can live in true alignment with our authentic nature, that's Uranus, and also our grounded values that we just live by day to day, that's Taurus. Uranus always wants to liberate us. Uranus wants to free us to become more authentic and more real, more us and less the preconditioned, societally deemed acceptable versions of ourselves, which very often leads to rebelliousness, right? Or trying to break out or break free. So what can we expect with Uranus and Gemini? On the global sphere, of course, AI, right? There's a Gemini is just language. And what people now call AI is just large language models that mimic knowledge through mimicking an opponent. There is the mirror, the other, which we long for with Gemini. We long for the human interaction. And so many of us don't have that. And thus, this dissociative part that Uranus also highlights that just creates or recreates the mimicking of another, a mirror, an opposite, a playmate, which we can bounce our mind back and forth off from. So here, this is one big thing, the whole AI, ChatGPT, large language models, and so on and so forth. Space and air travel revolutionizing and breaking through, or just maybe revealing what has been part of some deeper programs of military for maybe many decades. But also, whatever, alien consciousness, different kind of consciousness that is maybe also out there. So much of this will be revolutionized with Uranus in Gemini. Since Uranus connects to Pluto in early Aquarius, this aspect is just heightened of a huge influx of new kind of technologies that will very much feel like they're expanding our scope of what we consider to be real or what is consciousness itself. But here we also really have to pay attention to the delusive nature, all the delulu out there that Saturn and Neptune signal, right? Neptune is pure consciousness itself. And with Saturn and Neptune right now, we have this complete collapse of meaning-making structures in the world and society and on a personal level. And so people projecting consciousness into, for example, a large language model, thinking, oh, there's actually a sentient being behind that, and it's my soulmate or whatever. So this delusion pattern we will see being played out through the realm of technology a lot as well. On a more personal level, moving back to that, Gemini is all about how we view reality and the kind of stories we also unconsciously tell ourselves. Later on, in the opposite sign of Sagittarius, we translate that to what and how what do we believe about reality? What do we believe about ourselves? Our unconscious and our conscious belief systems. But with Gemini, first, it's just about gathering facts, gathering data. How we connect that then is a different topic. And so this gathering data, gathering information, gathering insights will be a huge thing. But maybe the revolutionary thing will also be looking and longing for the human opponent, because the collective dissociation, but also fatigue of technology will also be a big thing. And here the revolutionizing and rebelling against this seeming progress and actually realizing that face-to-face interaction with actual human beings is the revolutionary thing. This is something you can't fake. You can't trust. And soon enough, nobody of us will be able to trust what we see on our screens anymore. The AI models will be able to replicate all kinds of images. And this longing for the human interaction to find a sense of identity and explore and express our authentic beingness will also be a big thing here. In general, though, Uranus in Gemini wants to break our mind open, break our mind and our consciousness free. Gemini can get very trapped in the dualistic black and white kind of reality. And this is something that our mind just gravitates to so immensely because we want simple answers. The deeper side of Gemini, though, shows us that everything is complex. You never know how things connect because ultimately everything connects in some way or another. But in between are a million gazillion shades of gray. There's so much gradients. There's never a true black and white. And so Uranus and Gemini will correspond very much to where and how we ourselves are trapped in our own mind, and thus in our nervous system and our unconscious nervous system responses to reality, to how we engage with the mirror of reality itself. But at first, that might also make us very ungrounded, and hence this recollection of the deeper Taurus energy and Taurus lesson of the reconnection to body, to nature, to gentleness, to slowness, when everything will seem like it's picking up speed even more so. Uranus and Gemini will correspond to a huge influx of technologies in the way that we have never seen before. And if we think the last, 20 years, 30 years of our internet age has been fast, just buckle up your seatbelts because this will get so much faster. Where and how this plays into the bigger picture of why 2026 and 7 is so monumental is because of this aspect pattern, because between Uranus, Pluto in early Aquarius, and Neptune, and to a degree also Saturn in early Aries. This will really start hitting home from July on, which is when Uranus makes that first perfect trine aspect to Pluto. I already said it in the other videos, but Uranus and Pluto were together for the last time, like their new moon moment, their conjunction, in the late 60s in Virgo. This opening trine is the first trine aspect. It's like the in the moon cycle, if you take that metaphor for where and how we see the cyclical nature of the other archetypes playing with each other, the opening trine is like the last couple of days before the cycle moves towards the full moon moment. So there's this waxing, there's this fullness, there's this growth, there's this expansion that comes with these two archetypes. Pluto is all about power, hidden power, the darkness, the plutocracy, right? That is actually ruling the world. And Uranus is this breaking free, wanting to be different and not playing by the rules and not wanting to be ruled or governed by anybody or anything out there, which we saw so much in the hippie revolution of the late 60s, of the anti-Vietnam War protest, right? So this opening trine will also continue and bring up into the collective consciousness again, very much so, stories, archetypes, themes of patterns that have begun, that have been seeded in the late 60s. Some that might have been dormant for years and years and years, or slowly moving along, others having been more or less on the forefront of human consciousness, that will just reach another peak, another crescendo of energy. Connecting that to Neptune in early Aries, and also what I said earlier, this complete collapse of meaning-making structures, the complete collapse and dissolving, right? The Neptune archetype is dissolving, it's washing away of what Saturn has given us: stability, ground, something to hold on to, whether that's outer authority, the government, the structures, whatever. And here we see the big disillusionment, which is needed but painful, but also the big confusion and illusion and deception and feeling lost. And so this general feeling of humanity, of feeling completely lost right now, we see so much of what many people could say looks like the collapse of civilization. And I guess in many ways you could say that is true, but that is also a necessary stage of the collective evolution before this new renaissance, this new awakening can really take hold. The system is collapsing, the system is dissolving. What we can trust on, what people put their faith in or feel like they can rely on, whether that's external on the outer structures of society, also very much internal. What do I even still believe in? Who am I even still? Nothing makes sense anymore. What is even going on, right? So many people are sitting with these kind of feelings right now. And this is also that Saturn, Neptune in early Aries, the total new beginning of a huge collective cycle, which we're just starting out. We need to find new mythologies. We need to find new meaning-making structures and new inner ways of what we can believe in and what we want to put our faith into, right? Uranus and Gemini will correspond to where and how we need to break free from our mind and our limited perceptions, where we get locked in duality consciousness, in the either or, and need to learn to see the end. It's like, this is true, and that is true as well. They might seem like opposites, they might seem like paradox, but actually they both support each other. And needing to hold this kind of awareness of an and consciousness instead of an either or is so much what Uranus and Gemini will teach us. Like I said before, we all, of course, have both Taurus and Gemini in our chart somewhere. So even if you have no planets in Gemini at all, you have Uranus somewhere in your chart, you have Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, somewhere in your chart. And Gemini rules a certain house, so a certain area of your life, of your personality expressing itself and finding its way through reality. So whenever an outer planet shifts, it's really, really, really important and interesting to pay attention to the small signs of synchronicities or events happening, inner or outer, right? Because Uranus also seeds new potentials of where and how we want and can express our authentic nature. So with Uranus usually comes this desire, I want to break free, I need to break free, I need to do things differently because this is not working anymore, or who I was is not working anymore, or who I was is not even who I am anymore, right? Again, piggyback to that Saturn Neptune, the dissolving of inner and outer structures and conditioning. So it's a major, 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 major transit, something we'll talk about and explore, and also something nobody of us can truly know and understand, implying or creating or manifesting or reflecting in reality over the next coming 7 years. Of course, there's cycles we can look to. One very prominent and something that many people talk about is, of course, every single time Uranus is in Gemini, the 84-year cycle, the USA is in a major conflict. There was a civil war, there was the independence war, there was the Second World War, and now 84 years again later, something will be up in the USA. It's interesting to think about the Gemini archetype in regards to the USA as well, because in some systems of astrology, esoteric astrology, according to Alice Bailey and her teacher, Dwight Kuhl, the Tibetan teacher, countries have personalities and souls, just like human beings do. And this system says that the prevalent archetype of the personality level of the USA is Gemini. And there we see very much the getting lost on the black and white kind of consciousness, the left and right, the identity politics, the Democrat, Republican, the racist segregation that was also a big part or still is of the United States. And on a higher level, on the soul level of the United States, we have the Aquarius archetype, which again, Uranus is the modern co-ruler or has strong association to Aquarius. Freedom, liberty, right? Authenticity. No god, no king rules here. Everybody can freely choose who they believe or what they believe into, but that there's no dogma coming from a state, a king, a president, or anything. So this is also one of the reasons why the USA is struggling with that Gemini archetype and the black and white thinking so much, also internally, of course, but then projecting it outwardly, right? There's always the bad, mean guy somewhere out there that we have to fight. And this projection of the villain and the savior, or the villain and the victim, is, of course, another huge thing that we see with the Gemini archetype, right? The ancient story of the two warring brothers, the ancient stories of the Bible and whatever other culture, every culture has these stories of brothers or siblings, one divine, one mortal. And that really points us to the deepest layer of the Gemini archetype within every single one of us and our own individuation as human beings, moving from and through the personality to the soul aspect. There is the mortal that has to die. That's a personality on some level, right? That has to be refined so that the immortal, the higher self, the soul, or twin flame, whatever name you want to give it, can be reached or can be challenged and channeled, both probably. So this is like this deeper side of Gemini. But yeah, we will express that so much through a need and a desire to engage more on the one-on-one and in the personal, interpersonal, and getting away from the screens, while the mainstream will get lost in the screens and lost in this AI delusion, virtual reality, whatever, even more so, being sucked into it. So there's so much temptation in these luminous screens, right? And instead of finding that inner luminous light, in some esoteric traditions, Uranus is also considered to be either connected to the spine itself or also that kundalini fire of the soul awakening and moving through the energy centers. And Uranus being this electrical buzzing frequency that liberates us from this illusion of separation, from this illusion of mortality even. So Uranus here in Gemini also corresponding to where and how this on the deepest, most personal, most inner worlds level, once it needs to express itself, will be on the one side the temptation being sucked into the artificial light of the screen and all of the nervous system overstimulation and the exhaustion, but the trying to get away and free ourselves in some way or another from this drudgery of material reality. Whereas a more healthy embodied approach, I would say, would be this one-on-one engagement and the different engagement with what we consider language and intelligence. And AI is not intelligence, it's not sentient, there's no consciousness in it. Does it maybe tap into some extra dimensional ET consciousness that does not have the best interest for humanity at heart and piggybacks to ancient Atlantean karma? For sure, I would say, my belief. You believe whatever you want to. But we need to embrace this actual human nature. And this is where Gemini can really shine. And this is where Uranus and Gemini can really shine. A different frequency of kind of, I kind of really don't even want to say that word, but like upgrading, pardon me, upgrading our nervous system to be more receptive while at the same time not being so overwhelmed or overstimulated, right? And the widening and opening our sensitivity and then seeing all the curious cross connections, but without getting lost on the delusion and the projection, right? Which is also so prevalent right now. Anyhow, just a few thoughts on Uranus shifting into Gemini. I hope this was illuminating in some way or another. If you want to book a session with me one-on-one and see where this really hits you and activates something in your life, or what maybe also the last 7-8 years of Uranus and Taurus have brought up for you, and how to really integrate that moving into the next cycle, I'm always available and looking so forward to meeting you. And yeah, if you want to give this video a like and subscribe, that would mean so much to me. Thank you so much for that, supporting me in my work. And yeah, wishing you a grounded, curious, playful, but also very exciting Uranus and Gemini 7 years ahead.